Hello, everyone, and welcome to our session, Learning the New Language of the EMA and the FDA FHIR. The format of today will be a question and answer session, and I'm happy to have two industry experts joining me today to answer the questions. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce you to these experts. First off, we have Mike Baird, the Director of Product Management at Schlafender Haza. He has more than 30 years of experience working with global packaging, labeling, pre-media, and artwork management leaders in the pharmaceutical and medical device sectors, with a particular focus on delivering new and innovative solutions to exceed customer needs. Gary Sainer is a senior regulatory principal in the Reed Tech Life Sciences Group. He is a subject matter expert on drug labeling, medical device UDI, and other structured content reporting to regulatory agencies and commercial organizations. He has over 40 years of experience in software development, process management, and data administration, with the last 19 years focused on the life sciences industry. All right, so now we're going to introduce the companies. Mike, can you share some company information about Schlafender Haza?
Of course, yeah, thanks, Tara. So Schlafender Haza's product is an easy-to-use content comparison software. It was designed specifically to reduce the time that regulatory professionals spend proofreading their content. The solution is called TVT, and it works to catch even the smallest of deviations early on in the process. It covers text, graphics, images, barcodes, and does a spell check. It works regardless of language, of layout, or of file format. And the solution has been built specifically from the ground up for the highly regulated industries like pharmaceutical, medical device, chemical, and crop science.
Okay, Gary, can you share a summary of Reed Tech?
Sure, thanks, Tara. Reed Tech is part of LexisNexis and the Relics Group, and since 1961, we've been providing information solutions to industry and governments. We entered into the life sciences space starting in 2005, when FDA required labeling content to be produced and submitted in XML, and then stayed with that pharma space with a lot of different expansions, a lot of different variations of SPL, moving into additional services more recently, ECTD preparation and other marketing applications. 2014, we expanded into medical devices and support that particular sector. And just last year, with new regulations in the cosmetic arena, we now support cosmetics. So in each of those sectors, we provide consultation services, regulatory product data management, and submission solutions. Very fortunate to have well over 1,000 medical device, pharmaceutical, and cosmetic clients. Tara?
Thank you, Gary. So before we jump into this session, I just want to take a moment to sort of set a foundation for the discussion today. There are significant technology changes being implemented by EMA, FDA, and other health authorities around the world. In some cases, replacing PDF and other paper-based labeling content with structured electronic documents based on XML. In other cases, health authorities are evaluating or adopting a more recent application of XML, such as FHIR, with added benefits. In this session, we'll focus on FHIR. The scope of FHIR is large, and the usage of FHIR in the healthcare industry is broad. So we won't have time to address everything today, but we will be focusing on is the regulatory subset, more specifically on submissions and labeling. Before we get started on the details of FHIR, let's understand the global regulatory trend to adopt electronic labeling and where FHIR fits in. So the first discussion topic, how is the labeling landscape changing at EMA and FDA? Mike, what is e-labeling, and can you share some background information on the initiative?
Yeah, of course, Tara, thanks. So I think as our audience will know, physical product information and labeling is a really crucial part of the regulatory process, and has obviously been provided to the patient for decades in its physical format. Following on from that, the concept of EPI, or electronic product information, is not a new idea either. Digitized product information and labeling has been available by various health authority and patient-focused websites for years, but mainly in the form of PDF. So this, even then, was a big leap forwards in terms of accessibility for patients and clinicians, but also it had its limitations too. PDFs are just basically replicants of the original Word source file. They're unstructured, they're not easily searchable, the font size is fixed, they're not very accessible. So there really was a need for another step forward in this area using technology. And that's how we've come to e-labeling, or EPI, electronic product information, and ultimately to FHIR. E-labeling is really, it's part of this global digitization trend where health authorities have or are changing from PDF to structured data, such as XML-based formats. A couple of examples of that: in the US, the FDA, back in 2004, they replaced PDFs with SPL, mandated use of eCTD for marketing applications, for example. Over in the EU, the legislation requiring the medicinal product attributes was put in place using an electronic standard, which is IDMP. And linked to that, the EMA replacing XCVMPD with FHIR to transfer medicinal products attributes in the future. Now, for some of the other regions, I've got a quick slide I can share, which is talking about e-labeling globally. So we can just have a look at a couple of the other regions that are focusing in on this. So, for example, Australia, the use of EPI in Australia is widespread. Information on all of their medicinal products is via EPI now. Paper product information is in fact optional, so that's a real big step forward. In Brazil, back in 2022, the Brazilian Health Agency approved the use of full EPI via QR codes on their packaging and labeling. In Japan, same kind of thing there, a government mandated change, in fact, to replace the paper leaflets with EPI was implemented back in 2021. And then finally in Singapore, in 2021, the HSA approved this full transition to digital formats of product information, again via QR codes or via URLs. So again, this dispensed with totally with the need to rely on these paper copies. So I think you can see there really is a shift towards this global digitization trend, and not just in pharmaceutical, of course, but across all industries. But in pharma, EPI and FHIR are obviously going to be a big part of that. There are many benefits to reducing the use of paper, as I'm sure we all know, for the climate, for patients with potentially lower literacy levels, speed of updates, and the provision of multilingual information. There are some downsides too, of course. Could be a lack of access to the internet, or even a lack of digital skills in the patients themselves. And these obviously still have to be addressed, but the motivation is clearly there.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Now we're going to our first poll question and see what our audience's awareness level of FHIR is. All right, what is your current awareness of FHIR? No idea. Second, heard of it, but I don't have a good understanding. Have a good understanding and using FHIR already. I'll give you a couple seconds here. Look what the outcome is. All right, a good variety so far. All right, so looks like the top two are the winners there. No idea or heard about it, but don't have a good understanding. Good, thank you. All right, moving on, discussion topic. What is the history of FHIR and what are the expected benefits of using FHIR? Okay, so let's start our focus on FHIR with some basics. Mike, what is FHIR and can you share some background information on the initiative?
Yeah, sure. So FHIR is, in simple terms, a standardized technology for data exchange. It's an acronym, of course. It stands for Fast Healthcare Interoperability Resources. Healthcare and interoperability are the two keywords here because that's what the whole technology is all about. I guess interestingly, fast in this context doesn't mean about the speed of transmitting data or making that data exchange. It's talking about how quickly this technology can be picked up. It's very familiar to existing developers of other technologies, so it can be really implemented quite quickly and easily. FHIR's development began back in 2012. So again, it's not a new idea, but it's really coming to the forefront over the past few years or even few months. HL7, who are a global standards organization, started developing this technology back in 2012. And it was they did it because it was really obvious that there was so much data out there in terms of the healthcare space, and it was growing rapidly and exponentially, and it was really difficult to manage all of this. So they were looking for a simple solution to do that, and to be able to share it easily with the people that need it, so the clinicians and the patients, obviously. So to be clear, for the purposes of this discussion, FHIR is not only EPI, but the EPI is a crucial aspect of the whole FHIR ecosystem. So ultimately, the existing product information will be made available in the FHIR format, either in XML or JSON, and that it's there for distribution to the patients and the clinicians as easily as possible. They'll be able to access it via apps or websites, through QR codes, through URLs, that kind of thing, and then they'll be able to interact with it in all the ways that's impossible or difficult to interact with PDF-based e-labeling. So searchability, multilingual, accessibility features, that kind of thing.
Okay, so Gary, why is FHIR being promoted and what are the benefits?
Well, thanks, Tara. The big question, why? Why are we here talking about FHIR? I think Mike alluded to that, in that there was a huge amount of healthcare data. It's being expanded quite quickly over the years. And some of the standards that HL7 supported and has in play right now have a pretty long history connected to them. So that use some very old technology that's been around for a number of years. So there was this need to process the data, transfer data, capture data in an easier fashion, move it from point to point faster, and use a better method of capturing that healthcare information. So Health Level 7 has made a very strong, significant change to sunset their existing standard V3. So you might be familiar with Health Level 7 V3 healthcare standard. But that has a sunset, end of life plans, and now Health Level 7 is moving over to FHIR. It's a new technology, more modern technology, able to be adopted. Some of the benefits, if one is moving from PDF or unstructured data, certainly the benefit of going to FHIR is that this is XML, JSON based, so it has structured content, which has many significant advantages. It's digital, it's able to be used. There's multiple users that are able to access it. It's able to be filtered and searched much easier. It's able to be pieced together and able to be presented in multiple types of presentation using all the same master source data. So many things to move to XML, and then moving from an existing standard over to FHIR, or existing XML standard over to FHIR, is the enhanced interoperability. It has these additional support features to allow better use. There's more data transparency and so on. So there's a number of health authorities that have recognized that, including government and private organizations. So they're on board with the move to FHIR. We'll talk more about some of the health authorities where we want to focus today, EMA and FDA in particular, and others that are now moving to this, looking for the benefits to help their reviewers and also their downstream users. Tara?
Got it. So let's move on. How does FHIR standard compare to current medical product standards? Gary, can you please share how FHIR compares to FDA SPL?
Yeah, so SPL, first let's define what that might be for those in the audience who may not be familiar with it, structured product labeling. So going back to 2004 timeframe, the FDA worked with Health Level 7 to develop this standard. It's a subset of the V3 particular standard inside Health Level 7, and it's a very focused specification. It was targeted for just capturing and submitting medical product information and facility information to the FDA. That was the original intent. Now, since then, it has expanded quite a bit. Many other use cases have been created. In fact, I think there's well over 50 documents that the FDA has defined, and they include such categories as drug labeling, product listing establishment registration, various reports. It's even expanded into the medical device arena, where the FDA is now using SPL to capture unique device ID, UDI information. It has flowed to other health authorities. So Health Canada now uses SPL as a platform for their XML product monograph. And there's other uses. Australia TGA is actually going to making use of SPL to capture some of their medical device UDI. So started off with a very small focus, a lot of different documents, and now use in different health authorities. You compare that to FHIR in a very broad sense. It's also a health level standard. Both of these standards are structured data storage. They're not programming languages. And FHIR has a little bit more recent history, starting back in the 2012 timeframe, and a lot of revisions since then. So compare that to 2004 with FDA SPL, which much earlier technology. But FHIR has, as Mike had alluded to, very broad use in healthcare and hospitals and so on. And you'll see it in electronic health records, clinical decision support systems. I go to the physician and they pull out a tablet and they have a app on their tablet, and we go through questions and answers and that sort of thing. And they record my electronic health record and make updates. And then for that data to be captured and shuffled back and forth, with a hospital and other physicians that I might see or specialists, that information is able to be shared. And FHIR will be used for that particular process in the future. It's able to capture other medication and pharmacy needs. It's a very broad type of scope for FHIR, whereas FDA SPL is much more focused in just capturing product information and medical facilities and reporting to health authorities. Tara, you want to move on to maybe XEV MPD, perhaps?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, Mike, can you please tell us how does FHIR compare to EMA XEV MPD?
I can, yes, and it's not really a comparison. It's intended to be a replacement. So it's a bit like the principle Gary was talking about. This existing technology has been around for a long time now. The medicinal database for drug safety monitoring and tracking. It's EMA specific, so it's not a global standard. It's not accessible by any other countries or regions. So it's kind of time for a shake-up, really, and a bit like Gary was talking about. Either of these are not programming languages; they are storage standards. So it makes a lot of sense, I think, in the future for FHIR to replace the structured data format of XEV MPD. Ultimately, it's going to be gradually phased out. This has come from the EMA themselves. They stopped supporting it in a number of browsers, for example, some years ago, and it was only really accessible by a couple of browsers, or if you had plugins or extensions, that kind of thing. So you could really see they were backing away from it and looking to the future. The FHIR format is compatible for those data submissions, and this is intrinsically linked with SPORE as well. So you can see really, I think, that the EMA have really got their arms around this, and FHIR is so far-reaching, as we both said already, and the EMA are taking big steps in that direction to adopt it.
Okay, so let's move on to what is the progress of the regulatory bodies implementing FHIR to improve these processes. Gary, is there any progress being made within the FDA and Health Canada in implementing FHIR?
Yeah, certainly is a lot of progress. And usually the FDA is in concert with the health level 7 in some of these development standards. If we go back to a number of years ago, 2020 actually, there's some history where the FDA was working with health level 7 to create an implementation guide for FHIR. And they have, over the last couple of years, put together some transforms, put together some harmonization tests. Just this last summer, there was a study performed by a small industry group. There was about 9 manufacturers that participated in a little pilot evaluation of transferring SPL content to FHIR. And that was very successful. So there was a good result at the end of that. There is a wrap-up summary that contact me or whatever, be glad to share it with you. But that was a thumbs up to proceed with considering converting SPL content into FHIR. So there's a lot of good progress there. The FDA also has other activities that make use of FHIR at a very high level. So there's adverse event reporting pilot that is working with FHIR. FDA is also participating in various groups inside Health Level 7. There's a Vulcan Accelerator group. Some of this activity is inside BR&R focus group, where they're looking at healthcare and clinical research. So anyway, the FDA is very much involved in converting to FHIR, adopting FHIR for many different standards. There's some activity with pharmaceutical quality as well. Now, moving over to Health Canada, Tara, you also asked about Health Canada. I would say that Health Canada is not nearly as aggressive or far along as what the FDA has been pursuing along the lines of FHIR. They do have some planning activities. They put together something called a Canadian baseline specification, and they have some places to store their collaborative development work. There's actually a little initiative, SMART on FHIR, that they're involved with. But I think Health Canada is kind of waiting for things to firm up. They're definitely involved. They attend meetings and so on. But I think the actual work pushing forward is much more advanced at FDA.
Okay, thank you, Gary. So on the other side, are there any updates from the EMA or other regulatory bodies that you can provide some insight on, Mike?
Yeah, sure. I guess as the audience might be aware, from an EMA or European perspective, there's this proposed legislation revision of the EU pharma legislation, which is known as Article 63. And this is to allow for EPI officially in the future. So I guess in preparation for that, the EMA has been working hard behind the scenes. They've used this opportunity to create what's called the EU EPI Common Standard. And very recently, the EMA, in conjunction with a group of EU national competent authorities, have tested the use of EPI based on this EU EPI Common Standard. They ran a one-year pilot scheme from July 23 to July 24. Participating countries included Spain, Denmark, Netherlands, and Sweden. And the pilot has obviously now concluded back in July, and we're still waiting for the official report, which will give us a lot more detail, but we know 2 things. One, it's enabled companies out there to create and manage these EPIs using FHIR during kind of real-life regulatory procedures by using this authoring tool on the product lifecycle management portal. And the second thing that's come out of that is that the 23 EPIs that were created during this pilot are now publicly available on that portal. So it's a real success story as far as the EMA is concerned. The common standard, the EU EPI common standard, has been fully adopted by the European Medicines Regulatory Network now, and it's designed to support the provision of harmonized electronic information on medicines across the entire EU. In addition, you've got the SPORE version 2 API, which has already been implemented using FHIR technology. As we mentioned before, that's intrinsically linked to IDMP. In terms of other regions beyond the EU borders, none are really as advanced as the EU are in this regard. But if you think back to that e-labeling map that we shared a while ago, where I can talk through a few examples there. And really, there are no current specific regulations mandating the use of standards in electronic health data exchange. But FHIR is really being heavily promoted, as you probably can imagine, by quite a number of key authoritative bodies, including HL7 in its various local organization guises. They're the creators of it, they're trying to standardize it, so they're really trying to push it, of course. There are literally thousands of projects going on. I think the current count is around 8,000 globally, testing out the feasibility of using FHIR and having it adopted as a true global standard for this health data exchange. As Gary just talked about, so to North America certainly, but also in Central and South America, in parts of Africa, Europe, as we know, and the Middle East, Asia, and as far out as Australia. Pretty much every country is exploring their FHIR options right now.
Okay, thank you.
Well,
let's move on to the big question on everyone's mind. What is the expected timing of FHIR adoption and mandatory use? So everyone wants to know when they need to make these changes. Mike, can you share some FHIR milestones and expected future transition periods?
Yes, I'll do my best. So we wanted to share a kind of snapshot of what's happened up to this point. So we put this slide together to try and easily illustrate where we've come from and where we are. And you can see things are relatively recent. I mean, they don't go back beyond kind of 2001, but all the changes have happened really quickly, as you can see, based on what's on the screen now. So this is focused obviously on the FDA and the EMA with HL7 being involved. But you can see this slow build-up over the years, which has then become a very quick build-up in the last couple of years in this creation and implementation of the HL7 standards right from the start, as we said, back in 2012, up to where we are now, which is version 5, and then this projected version 6, which is due probably next year now. And this is where FHIR comes into play here. So down at the very bottom right, you can see on those two bars, you can see that HL7 has really been actively engaging with the FDA and the EMA. And that, I'm only speculating, but I think it bodes really well for future standardization efforts. Again, speculation on my part, but despite the work already done and the pilots having been taken place, there is still no clear timeline for future adoption or implementation. Of course, we're going to be watching carefully, and of course, we can make some of our own personal predictions that this will be adopted as a global standard at some point in the next few years.
Okay, thank you for shedding some light on that. Let's move on to what are the impacts of transitioning to FHIR. I think this is a very interesting question. Gary, how do you see FHIR impacting our audience?
Well, I think there's going to be significant impacts, and it'll come in waves. So the first wave will be the short term. Some of the early adopters, those that participated in pilots, there's portion of industry that jumps on new technology. The second wave will be the transition period, and that actually could be a couple years in length. I don't think it's going to be Monday morning flip the switch and boom, now we're off to FHIR. it's going to be a transition over a number of years. And then the third wave is going to eventually be a state where industry is now using FHIR on a regular basis. It's very common. It's well understood, and it's a daily standard in use, and no big deal. There's no news, right? The middle wave, that midterm type of period, is going to be the most difficult. That is that transition period. And there's a number of challenges in adopting a new standard. So we talk first about some of the infrastructure and the tools. First of all, the authoring tools, the migration tools, they need to be commercialized and made available. They need to be easy to use. Yes, there's some transforms and things like that are being rolled out that'll ease this particular conversion from existing content over to FHIR. But with any new technology, there's some, I'll call them the technology geeks out there that are able to make it happen. But if you want to see industry change, that has to be implemented across the board and made easy for the masses to adopt. So first challenge is going to be technology. The second challenge related to that will be the support systems. So what is the infrastructure that supports your current content, and how does it move over to FHIR-based? So all new file formats, means of creating the documents, versioning the documents, storing the documents, making them available, and even to the point of submitting those documents. The other challenge is going to be the people, those involved in this particular transition. Huge learning curve is expected, and I base that on the fact that there was a huge learning curve for adoption of SPL in the US. So those people that needed to become involved in supporting SPL, typically regulatory departments, they're great at understanding regulations, making sure their product meet all the regulations and so on. They did have some skill sets and actually the technology behind it to create SPL. Certainly, there's points out there where, those people are able to handle that. But as a general term, there was an additional help that was needed to create this SPL content. So that's going to be another learning curve for FHIR, without a doubt. And then there are supporting processes, these standard operating procedures. Everything that you're currently doing now with existing standards, whether it be XEV MPD or whether it be SPL related, now, boom, you're going to have to go back and update all those processes. There's going to be some significant changes in that. Once all that is in place, we need to realize that there's a mountain of legacy data. US Daily Med has over 150,000 products in it. XEV MPD has 500,000 products in it. So think about, overnight pushing a button and trying to convert that to FHIR. It's not an easy task. Certainly there's going to be enhancements and some changes when you actually migrate to the new standard. So, what are the updates? Oh, by the way, we're moving to a new standard. Oh, but let's make sure it's current, correct, and, everything is up to date. So just managing all that and handling the volume is going to be tough. I highly recommend those in the audience keep, their finger on some of these initiatives, monitor that. Certainly HL7 has some public information that you're able to access. The health authority initiatives have websites, and you can follow them. There's a couple other groups that keep an eye on the FHIR adoption. So you definitely want to ease the pain of the transition and become educated, know what's coming down the pike, and start to prepare for it. And I think, you'll be better suited for that transition when it comes, Tara.
Thank you, Gary. Mike, did you have anything to add here?
Yeah, I mean, Gary's covered it all there, I think. But I think the biggest thing is the outstanding questions. So it was interesting to see the poll question results, which interesting but not at all surprising. It's that there are a lot of questions from people in the industry surrounding FHIR and EPI in general. I think the people in regulatory affairs are really concerned about, having increased workloads, like Gary has just described, about having to learn something new, yet another system to use, or another process or procedure to follow. What happens if FHIR doesn't become the global standards that we're kind of speculating it might do? Is that going to cause any problems? All these are open questions. The timelines, as we just touched upon, the EMA, so I was at a conference last week where the EMA talked about this, and they suggested that, of course, it will be voluntary adoption in the early days. They couldn't answer if it would become mandated, but if it did, it'll be a long time away. So even the authorities don't know what's going on. Speaking of that conference and related to the poll question, they did a snap poll in that session that I was in, and very similar results. 70% of the attendees of that conference said that they had no real awareness of EPI or FHIR, which again, interesting but not surprising. But on a positive note, 17% did say that their companies have already initiated some kind of EPI project internally. So things are happening, things are talking about this. As you go to these conferences, whichever ones you attend, more and more, there is more and more talk about an understanding of EPI and FHIR than ever before. There are lots of organizations, as Gary just mentioned, that can help with this. They can share knowledge and educational materials, the EMA themselves, the FDA, HL7, Gravitate Health, and even private organizations like Hauser and Retech, of course. And online, there are probably too many resources, actually. There's a lot of talk about this because it's a really hot topic. And as I say, you see that at every single conference now. It's a real hot topic, and it's really prevalent.
Thank you for that addition. Gary, this one is for you. How do you see FHIR being used in or affecting the submission process?
Well, I don't think it's actually going to change too much the actual submission process. Again, I say that assuming that all those background and infrastructure changes, have been in place. So updating the systems, your SOPs, understanding, doing all the training, having a good understanding of what FHIR is and preparing it and including it. So let's just take a couple examples where it might be a touch point. SPL is used in ECTD for those pharmaceutical applications. So the marketing applications, you might have, well, certainly it shows up with the labeling and inside module 1 of the ECTD submissions for new drug applications and BLAs, INDs, and so on. The standards, ECTD, would need to change their specification to allow a FHIR document rather than an SPL document. So I think there'll be multiple parallel submissions over a portion of time where you could submit one or the other in that particular module 1 inside ECTD for the labeling content. But once you package it and publish your ECTD, the actual submission through the electronic submission gateway to the FDA, I would expect to be very much the same as what's going on now. That submission is probably not going to have much change based on the fact that there was a little bit different in the payload. The other place SPL is used is for direct submissions through the electronic submission gateway for product listing, pharmaceutical facility and their establishment registrations and labor code requests and many other reports, LDR and so on, all have this particular pathway where the SPL file would be submitted directly through the electronic submission gateway. So again, in that case, the electronic submission gateway would need to be revised to make sure that it's able to handle a FHIR document rather than an SPL document. But I think the procedure would be very the same. And now if we move over to Europe, your SMPCs and pills and other patient information leaflets and so on, right now packaged in a PDF type of format and reviewed and so on. Now that would change, assuming this EPI comes in place, and I certainly expect it'll happen. We have a period of time where we can prepare for it, but again, that content, when it's prepared, the way you move the existing SMPCs around, it would probably be the same way that you would be able to use, you know, a FHIR-based document. Now, there is some additional advantages that Michael had alluded to, and I just want to highlight them, that moving over to an XML-based FHIR has many benefits of disseminating that. So even though the submission to a health authority might be the same, the fact that you can take that XML document and reuse it for downstream uses is going to be a significant change as well.
Interesting, thank you. Mike, do you have any insights on how FHIR will be used in labeling?
So as we've talked about, you know, FHIR covers so many aspects of this, of the healthcare ecosystem. Labeling and PI is just a part of those, but it's really crucial. We all know that. This is how we get the information to the people that need it. So having this kind of globally standardized technology helping us to share that, to disseminate it, as Gary was talking about, but also about reusing it as well is going to be this huge benefit. Because the FHIR standard is designed to be easily adoptable and developed, I think it'd be amazing to see it becoming this global standard. And the EPI, the PI and the labeling information can then, you know, it can be shared seamlessly around the world. Think of the benefits to the patients, but also to the people in our audience, you know, the regulatory folks who are struggling with resources in terms of time and people themselves. You know, they want this efficiency in their daily work. And this is where this kind of adoption of this technology will really help there. And once the data is in this structured format, again, as Gary said, this reusing and repurposing it and automating even parts of the labeling process will be a huge benefit. And even if you can move on from that, think about ad promo. So outside of labeling, you know, yes, a future application, I'm sure, but the information from the product information is already existing, already in these componentized pieces, and then it can be just picked up and reused again and again. So it should really streamline the whole process.
Okay, thank you, Mike. We are ready for our second poll question. If you can bring that up. I'll read the question. So the question is going to be, what are your plans for using FHIR? And you can select all that apply here. First one being no current plans, you need help, you're in the gathering information phase, participating in pilots, and lastly, you've already created sample labeling using the FHIR standard. So let's see where we're at with that. Okay, so largely, there's no current plans. That's what it seems to be here. Over 60%, we're still collecting. Okay, yeah, so it looks like no current plans at 63%, and just under that, we have at 35%, we have gathering information. So we're kind of in the middle there. I guess we're not too surprised by those answers. So moving on to the next discussion topic, how can ReadTech and Schlaffer-Darhaza help you transition to FHIR? Gary, can you share what ReadTech is doing to help prepare your customers?
Yeah, sure, I'd be glad to, Tara. First of all, ReadTech is a member of health level 7, and we participate and monitor multiple health level 7 groups, certainly involved in those particular ones that are dealing with fire. So many times there's early activity surrounding an implementation guide and writing the specifications. So having advanced knowledge, early knowledge of these particular documents, these technical documents, and also samples is very valuable for us to prepare and fully understand some of these initiatives from the technology side. And then we are involved and keep an eye on the health authority initiatives. So in this particular case, let's talk about the SPL v3. We definitely evaluated that, looking at the report. So the SPL v3 replacement to use FHIR had a lot of good reviews, a lot of good comments on it. So very helpful in understanding that particular technology, as well as keeping an eye on the EMA EPI. So I think that's very crucial initiative to understand that. So we've definitely looked at those documents, looked at the SPLs or the EPI documents, FHIR documents that were actually created of the 23 there. So the other thing I'll quickly mention is in addition to gathering data, understanding the requirements, and building a platform to support that in the future, these FHIR documents. Those in the audience, if you have some interest in moving forward, you want to participate in a little pilot, we're looking for partners to join up with and explore this particular venue with you, see how it impacts you in your particular scenario. So there's a number of places that we are moving forward with, looking at the standards and wanting to move forward with some of the manufacturers that are dealing with FHIR.
Okay, and Mike, what are we doing in TBT?
So as some of the audience might know, TBT has been used for many years as part of the whole document creation and publishing workflow. But with this, it's kind of an increasing shift towards content instead of just documents. So TBT is really well positioned to help here. Even the current released version that's been out for more than a year now was specifically designed to support EPI and the process around that. So, for example, support for QR codes, data matrix codes, checking the links, checking the compliance of the web page that they link to, comparing that to the source material, supporting URLs and HTML file formats. So I think we're really well placed there. Now, particularly in the case of FHIR, or XML, should I say, we've had long-standing XML support, which obviously covered the US SPL format, but now we also offer FHIR support. So especially for those early adopters of FHIR, then I think TBT have really got their backs there.
Great, thank you. So we're going to move on to the fun part. Now we'll move on to the Q&A part of the session. We do have some questions from the audience that came in, so we'll read out a few questions and let you both decide who wants to answer those questions. Audience, please, if you don't hear your question, we'll contact you directly after the webinar. So question 1, will the use of FHIR become mandatory? Mike or Gary?
Yeah, I'm happy to take this. I think I alluded to it earlier, actually. So it's certainly as far as the EMA are concerned, the latest and greatest news from them, which was just last week, was that it may become mandatory, but if it does, it will be a long time in the future. They'll certainly be looking for volunteers to help develop it and to help adopt it and to help spread the word, as they did in the pilot this past 12 months. So my guess, yes, if it's globally adopted. Yeah,
I would add a second yes to that, Mike. For those that are in the audience, I'm going back a number of years now. There was an EMA project called PIM, Product Information Management, XML based, and it captured SMPC content in a XML standard that was rather complicated. But anyway, industry and including ourselves made great plans and move forward to support PIM. And then, Monday morning, woke up and saw that it had been put back on the shelf, and it never came back down off the shelf. So it left a little bit of a bad taste in the audience. I bring that up because I don't think EPI is anywhere near that. It's quite the opposite. So there is first of all, a global standard that is being used, FHIR, whereas that old PIM made use of a proprietary EMA XML activity and standard. And I think there's a huge amount of industry. I think industry is now ready to move into this type of technology. PDF for capturing that SMPC and pill information, pretty old technology and has some serious shortcomings and drawbacks. So I give a wholehearted yes, along with Mike, 2 yeses and no zeros, Tara.
Okay, perfect. Question number 2, is FHIR going to be a global standard or adopted by local health authorities?
You want to jump on that one, Mike, first?
Yeah, I think I think it's kind of been covered, but yeah, I would say my guess is yes, it will become a global standard. In the past 12 months, there's been such a snowball effect with, 12 months ago, nobody knew what FHIR was. They'd never even heard of it, even though it's been around for a few years. And now everybody's talking about it. Pilots are being run. The whole world is on fire. So yes, I do believe it will be.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I would support that. But additional comment, certainly it'll be a global standard. And I think certainly some of the major health authorities will adopt it. But there could be some health authorities out there that are either very, very slow in adopting it, or perhaps they never will. And I don't think we can say that everything around the world, every health authority is going to jump on board initially. So there'll be a long transition, and there might be a couple fringe health authorities that don't go there. They're either low tech or don't have funding, or to make use of the FHIR documents. But then on the flip side of that coin, if there's easy use of FHIR and technology and tools become very easy to use, then even the fringe health authorities, can easily convert over. So we're kind of wait and see if we get 100% adoption, but without a doubt, I think we'll find a global standard in play here very soon.
Okay, this is an interesting one. Do you think that this will impact medical devices as well as pharma?
Yeah, I have not seen, maybe I'll quickly answer that and then I might jump on board there. I have not seen any FDA activity to replace SPL with FHIR for the unique device identification activity. There is a FHIR-based adverse event reporting project going on, and off the top of my head, I believe that would be applicable to both the pharmaceutical and the medical device space, but I don't know that off the top of my head. It kind of came in as a fresh question here. But I see it being a little bit slower in adoption than in the pharmaceutical arena. That is far the leading sector that is adopting FHIR. There might be eventual adoption into medical device as well.
Do you have anything to add there, Mike?
Yeah, I agree. It will be slower. I think with med device, they're kind of exploring EPI now, maybe a little bit later than the pharma industry did, but I do think it'll happen because of the ease of adoption of this technology and the global sweep of it. I think it's ultimately, again, it's a guess, but yes, I think it will apply to med device.
Thank you. Okay, just minding our time. I know we're almost at our hour, but another question here. Could you please elaborate more regarding the FHIR and HL7? How are those two different and how are those connected to each other?
I can try to answer that one first. HL7 is a standards developing organization, and it actually covers many standards, and it authors and maintains standards that are used in transferring data and capturing data in the healthcare industry. I think the question was then, how does FHIR compared to HL7? FHIR happens to be one of the many standards that Health Level 7 authors and makes available. So FHIR is on the roadmap inside Health Level 7 to replace the version 3 standard that is currently in place and used by hospitals and other healthcare organizations. So one is a company, that's the HL7, and the other is a standard, FHIR.
Thank you. Okay, so actually thank you very much, Mike and Gary. That concludes our session today. I know that I've learned a lot. Hopefully the audience has as well. Please contact Reed Tech and Schlafenderhase if you have any follow-up questions or interest in discussing how they can help you implement FHIR or related labeling topics. Thank you.